Imagine this. You're walking through a crowded city street. You spot someone who looks exactly like you, same eyes, same voice, even the same scar just above the left eyebrow. But you've never met them. They weren't born in a hospital, never had a childhood, and never shared your memories, because they were grown from your DNA in a sterile lab. Not born, but replicated. This might sound like a wild episode from a Black Mirror marathon, but it's not fiction anymore. It's a scientific frontier quietly unfolding in research labs around the globe. Human cloning, the idea of creating a genetically identical human being, is no longer just the stuff of speculative sci-fi. The foundations for it already exist, and what was once a distant what if is rapidly morphing into a pressing when and how, with a chilling should we lingering in the background. The possibilities seem infinite. Organ regeneration, life extension, bringing back lost loved ones, or even creating genetically perfected superhumans. But lurking behind those promises are questions that punch straight into the core of what it means to be human. Do we really want to play creator? And if we do, who gets to decide which lives are worth duplicating? To truly grasp where we are, today we need to rewind a bit. Back to 1996, when a sheep named Dolly was introduced to the world. But Dolly wasn't just any sheep. She was the first mammal successfully cloned from an adult somatic cell using a process known as somatic cell nuclear transfer. In simpler terms, scientists took the nucleus of an adult cell and inserted it into an egg cell that had been stripped of its own genetic material. They then gave it a spark, an electrical current, to kickstart the development process, and it worked. Dolly was born with the exact same DNA as the sheep from which the adult cell was taken. It was groundbreaking and terrifying. Suddenly, cloning jumped from theory to practice. The world collectively asked, if we can do this with a sheep, what's stopping us from doing it with a person? Following Dolly's debut, cloning experiments spread like wildfire through the animal kingdom. Cats, dogs, cows, goats, pigs, and horses were all successfully cloned. In fact, some companies today offer commercial pet cloning for a hefty price tag of up to $50,000. Celebrities like Barbara Streisand have already done it. Her cloned dogs, Miss Violet and Miss Scarlet, were born from the cells of her beloved late pet, Samantha. But then came the real shocker. In 2018, Chinese scientists successfully cloned two macaque monkeys named Zhongzhong and Huahua. This was monumental, not because of the animals themselves, but because macaques are primates. Genetically speaking, they're not that far from humans. Suddenly, the question wasn't if anymore. It was who's going to be first. Cloning primates brought us one giant step closer to cloning humans, but not without major red flags. You see, the road to success was littered with failure. In the case of Zhongzhong and Huahua, over 70 embryos were created, but only 2 made it to birth. The rest were lost along the way, either failed to develop or died prematurely. These staggering failure rates are more than just numbers. They're a stark reminder of how unstable and dangerous cloning remains. Even Dolly wasn't a success story in the long run. She suffered from early-onset arthritis and died at only 6 years old, roughly half the lifespan of a healthy sheep. Autopsies revealed lung disease often seen in much older animals. Was her DNA already old when she was born? Was she destined to age prematurely from day one? And if so, what would that mean for a cloned human? Beyond the biology lies a deeper moral dilemma. Imagine cloning a child who died young, hoping to bring them back. But this child, though genetically identical, wouldn't have the same soul, thoughts, or experiences. Are we offering a second chance at life, or creating a living reminder of death? And then there's the dark potential. What if human cloning isn't used to heal, but to control? Think military-grade clones designed for combat. Political figures duplicated for manipulation. A market where wealthy elites clone themselves to cheat mortality, while the rest of humanity struggles to survive. Some might say that's far-fetched, but so was artificial intelligence 10 years ago. So was gene editing. And now both are part of our daily headlines. Because of these ethical quagmires, most countries have drawn hard lines. Over 70 nations have outright banned human reproductive cloning, including the United Kingdom, Canada, France, and Germany. In 2005, the United Nations called for a global ban on all forms of human cloning incompatible with human dignity. But enforcement is patchy, and in countries where regulations are vague or absent, private labs and fringe scientists continue to explore the edges of possibility. And where there's demand, there's always supply. Some bio-entrepreneurs claim to have already cloned humans in secret. One group, the Raelian movement, infamously claimed in 2002 that they cloned a baby girl named Eve. No evidence was ever produced. But the world took notice, because even if it hasn't happened yet, someone somewhere is surely trying. Every great journey starts with a few brave explorers. Right now, Cosmic Whispers is just beginning, and your support means everything. If you enjoy unraveling the mysteries of the universe, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us grow this community together, because what we're diving into today may shape the very essence of tomorrow's humanity. A mirror image of yourself, alive, breathing, but never truly you. Are you ready to go deeper? Now, let's step away from the science for a moment. Let's take a breath and focus on something more philosophical. What does it even mean to be human? Is it just our genetic code, the sequence of billions of nucleotides that make up our DNA? Or is it something more, something intangible, like our consciousness, our memories, the very experiences that shape us from the inside out? As we stand on the precipice of cloning, we're faced with the ultimate question. If we could replicate a person's DNA perfectly, would the clone be the same person, or would they simply be a copy? Picture this. You have a child. Let's say their name is Emma. Emma's full of life, she's curious, and she's your entire world. Tragically, she passes away too young, before she had a chance to reach adulthood. A few years later, a team of scientists approaches you with an extraordinary proposal. They can bring Emma back. Not with a memory or a spirit, but through cloning. They can take a cell from her, extract her DNA, and recreate her perfectly. She'll be physically identical to your daughter. The same hair color, the same laugh, the same eyes. But is she Emma? This is where the philosophical divide between science and morality really begins to tear at the fabric of what we hold dear. Is cloning a new form of life, or a pale imitation of the original? Could cloning raise the stakes of grief itself? After all, if we can bring back the dead through technology, are we playing God? And if we do this, should we have the right to decide who lives and who doesn't? Let's take this further. If cloning becomes a reality, imagine the implications it might have on our very understanding of identity. Consider this. Clones would, by definition, share an identical genetic makeup to their parent or original counterpart. They would have the same biological foundations, same eye color, same blood type, same skin tone. But that's where the similarities would end. Emma's clone might share her genes, but they wouldn't share her memories. They wouldn't share her thoughts or feelings. They wouldn't have her unique experiences, those moments that form a person's individuality. So, if this clone doesn't have the same life experience, does it even make sense to think of them as the same person? What if Emma's clone grew up with an entirely different personality, because they were raised in a different environment, surrounded by different people, different experiences? The clone would undoubtedly form their own identity. They might even resent being compared to the original. But what if, in a cruel twist of fate, they find themselves forced into the shadow of the original, constantly expected to live up to the memory of someone they've never been? The ethical and psychological toll of cloning could be immense, not just for the clone, but for everyone around them. Parents might feel they've been given a second chance, but what if the clone feels like an imposter, a product of grief rather than love? What if the child, now a grown adult, questions their existence, their meaning, and whether they were created for any purpose other than to replace someone else? How would society treat them? Would they be seen as the clone rather than an individual in their own right? It's a chilling thought, but it's not just theoretical anymore. In fact, some scientists believe the future of cloning may actually lie in recreating specific genetic traits rather than entire individuals. Imagine a world where you could design a child with a specific set of desirable qualities, perhaps intelligence, athleticism, or even a perfect immune system. This isn't fiction, this is what's happening in the realm of gene editing, where we've already successfully edited the genes of embryos. It's not far-fetched to think that cloning and gene editing could soon merge, leading to a future where humans aren't just cloned but customized. There's a growing fear that this could lead to a world where designer babies are the norm. Those who can afford the procedure will be able to choose physical and intellectual traits for their children. The rich would essentially have access to genetic perfection, while those without resources could be left behind, destined to have children who may suffer from genetic diseases, mental health issues, or other inherited conditions. But this idea is more than just ethically challenging, it's a ticking time bomb. It introduces the very real possibility of genetic inequality, where the genetically superior class could dominate society. Imagine a world where your worth is determined not by your abilities, but by your genetic makeup. Could society fracture into genetic elites and genetic underclasses? If you thought the gap between rich and poor was already bad, this might make that divide look like child's play. There's also a darker, dystopian side to consider: state-sponsored cloning. In the worst-case scenario, imagine a totalitarian regime that uses cloning as a tool for power. What's to stop a dictatorship from cloning soldiers, political leaders, or even entire families to solidify control? What if cloning is no longer about scientific progress, but about controlling lives? In fact, the concept of cloning and its potential abuse has already been explored extensively in literature and film. We've seen it in movies like The Island and Never Let Me Go, where clones are bred for a specific purpose, whether that's organ harvesting or serving as mindless workers. In these stories, the clones often struggle with their existence, seeking meaning in a world that views them as expendable. But let's bring it back to the real world. While the technology to clone humans hasn't yet been perfected, and may never be, the ethical debates are already sparking fires. Think about the moral consequences of creating a life that's genetically identical to another. How does society assign value to life if it's made in a laboratory, rather than born in a natural process? And what about the clone's autonomy? Could we truly create a life with the same rights, dreams, and opportunities as someone born traditionally? The fact is, cloning forces us to confront some of the most fundamental questions about who we are, what it means to be alive, and whether we have the right to create or destroy life based on our desires. It challenges our beliefs about free will, the soul, and the nature of humanity itself. And these questions aren't just for the scientists and bioethicists to answer. They're questions that every one of us will need to face, as the line between science fiction and reality continues to blur. Now that we've unraveled the ethical dilemmas and potential dangers, it's time to turn the page and look toward the future. What's next for human cloning? Can we find a balance between the potential benefits and the moral minefields? Now let's fast forward into the future. Imagine you're living in a world where human cloning isn't just a possibility, it's a reality. The technology is no longer a secret in underground labs. It's evolved beyond the experimental stage and has entered mainstream society. Cloning humans is no longer a far-off dream, but a carefully controlled scientific practice. But before we jump into the implications, let's take a look at the science that could bring this future to life. One of the most exciting yet controversial developments in human cloning research is the fusion of cloning with gene editing technology. Let's break that down. If you recall the groundbreaking work of scientists like Jennifer Doudna, who helped develop CRISPR-Cas9, you'll know that gene editing has already allowed us to alter the genetic makeup of organisms with precision. CRISPR works by acting like a pair of molecular scissors that snip out faulty genes and replace them with healthier, more desirable ones. It's been used to edit everything from bacteria to human embryos. But what if this technology was combined with cloning techniques to produce genetically perfect humans? The potential here is mind-blowing. Imagine being able to clone a human and then use CRISPR to eliminate genetic diseases before they even have a chance to take root. Diseases like cystic fibrosis, Huntington's disease, or even certain forms of cancer, could be eradicated from the human gene pool forever. This isn't just science fiction, it's already happening in the lab. In 2017, scientists in China used CRISPR to successfully edit the genes of human embryos, eliminating the gene responsible for a type of blood disorder known as beta thalassemia. While this research sparked an outcry over the ethical implications of editing the human genome, it also demonstrated that the combined power of cloning and gene editing could one day eliminate genetic diseases entirely. But let's be clear, while the medical possibilities are tantalizing, they're also deeply unsettling. Imagine the slippery slope of genetic enhancement. What if, in the future, cloning doesn't just serve to eliminate diseases, but to create the perfect human? Could we one day have people who are genetically designed to be smarter, stronger, healthier? Would we be able to select for traits like intelligence, athletic ability, or even physical appearance? The concept of designer babies might sound like a dystopian fantasy, but we're not far from a world where this could become a reality. Imagine a society where some people are born with the genetic potential to be super intelligent, to have faster reaction times, or perhaps to live longer lives. Could the inequality between the rich and the poor grow even wider as the wealthy create genetically enhanced children, while the rest of society remains ordinary? What happens to the idea of fairness and merit in a world where your genetic makeup might determine your success before you even take your first breath? On the flip side, there's another promising aspect of cloning that could revolutionize medicine: organ regeneration. Right now, thousands of people around the world are waiting for organ transplants, heart, kidney, liver, and lung donations that could save their lives. But the waiting lists are long, and there simply aren't enough donors. What if cloning could solve that problem? Imagine if we could clone organs grown from a patient's own cells to create genetically identical organs that could be transplanted without the risk of rejection. We're already seeing the beginnings of this in animal cloning. In 2014, researchers at the Oregon National Primate Research Center successfully cloned rhesus monkeys to produce genetically identical embryos. These embryos were later used to grow stem cells, which could potentially be used to regenerate human tissues. But here's where it gets even more fascinating and equally terrifying. What if we could create fully cloned organs from human cells? These organs would be perfect genetic matches for the people who need them, eliminating the problem of organ rejection altogether. In theory, we could have an endless supply of organs, all tailor-made for individual patients. But as with everything in the world of cloning, this opens the door to a host of ethical and moral concerns. Would it be right to clone human organs if it means creating life just to harvest it for parts? What happens to the clone itself? Are we treating them as nothing more than a biological commodity? And where do we draw the line? How far can we push the boundaries of science before we've gone too far? These are questions that scientists and ethicists are already grappling with today. But as the technology advances, the answers will become more pressing. Let's talk about the science behind it a little more. Human cloning doesn't just involve creating a copy of an individual. It's about understanding the science of cellular reprogramming. You see, cloning isn't as simple as hitting a button and copying DNA. It involves a highly intricate process of reprogramming a cell's DNA to return it to a state where it can become a fully developed organism. This reprogramming process is known as somatic cell nuclear transfer, SCNT, the same technique used to create Dolly the sheep. The problem? Even today, this process is far from perfect. A study published in 2015 revealed that SCNT has a success rate of less than 1%. That means for every 100 attempts, 99 fail. The embryos either fail to develop or die early in their growth, but as scientists push the boundaries of this technology, they're making incredible strides. In 2021, a team of researchers in China succeeded in cloning monkeys by improving the SCNT process, and they were able to create a higher number of viable embryos. This gives us a glimpse of what the future might hold. If human cloning ever becomes a reality, it's likely that the technology we use will be far more efficient than it is today. However, there's a dark side to all of this. As the technology becomes more advanced, there will inevitably be those who will seek to exploit it for personal gain. Could cloning become a tool for the wealthy to create genetically engineered superhumans? Could the desperate desire to defeat death lead to a black market for human cloning, where people can pay to replicate loved ones or create genetically modified children to satisfy their whims? The possibilities are both exciting and terrifying. But one thing is certain: cloning will not be something that remains in the realm of the theoretical for much longer. As we move forward into a future where science and technology continue to blur the lines between life and death, we'll be forced to confront the deep ethical dilemmas that cloning raises. What will happen to our humanity if we can create life on demand? Will we still value life as we do now? Or will we begin to see it as something disposable, something we can make, alter, and control? As we approach the final stretch of our exploration, let's zoom out for a moment and consider the bigger picture. Can cloning ever be fully integrated into society, or will it forever be a contentious and controversial issue? What's the future of cloning, and could it ultimately change the way we define life itself? As we approach the final stretch of our journey, let's step back and take a moment to really reflect on what we've just explored. We've ventured through the labyrinth of science, ethics, and philosophical dilemmas. We've considered the future possibilities of cloning, both the exhilarating potential and the frightening consequences. But now, as we stand at the edge of this vast unknown, we have to ask, what does the future hold for human cloning, and how will society navigate this complex terrain? If human cloning ever becomes a widespread reality, one of the greatest challenges will be defining its place in society. In the world we live in today, the concept of cloning is still largely theoretical, wrapped in layers of controversy and debate. But if the technology advances to the point where cloning becomes as normal as childbirth, how will we handle it? Will clones be seen as equal to their non-cloned counterparts, or will they remain second-class citizens, perpetually living in the shadow of their genetic originals? Think about the implications for families. Would parents who choose to clone a child be doing so out of love, trying to recreate the person they lost, or would they be crossing a line, treating life as a mere product to be replicated? The emotional weight of creating a clone could be unimaginable. As we saw earlier, the clone may not be the same person as the original. Their personality, their memories, their soul, none of these would be guaranteed. Could the act of cloning someone be seen as an attempt to rewrite history, to erase the pain of loss, only to open up new emotional wounds? And what about the clones themselves? Imagine being the child of someone who has already passed away, knowing that you were created not from love, but from the remnants of grief. Would clones ever truly feel like they had their own identity? Would they be burdened by the expectations of those who created them? Would they forever feel trapped in the image of someone they never knew? On the other hand, we can't ignore the incredible potential benefits that cloning offers. With advancements in science, cloning could revolutionize medicine in ways we can hardly fathom today. Imagine a world where organ shortages are a thing of the past, where human beings no longer have to wait years for a heart, a kidney, or a liver to be donated. Imagine if you could grow a perfect match of your own organs, cells that are genetically identical to your own, without the risk of rejection. This could change the lives of millions of people suffering from organ failure, giving them a chance at life they might never have had. But as with any technology, there's a double-edged sword. The very advancements that promise to save lives could also lead to new forms of exploitation. If cloning is used to harvest organs, or even create a class of genetically enhanced humans, we risk creating a world of inequality, where genetic perfection becomes a commodity and human life becomes something that can be bought and sold. We could find ourselves in a society where the rich and powerful can control the future of humanity, designing their children with the best traits money can buy, while the rest of society remains vulnerable to the whims of the genetic elite. And then there's the ultimate question: should we even be attempting to play God? If we can create life, should we? There are many who argue that the risks of cloning far outweigh any potential benefits. They warn that we are tampering with forces beyond our understanding, and that the consequences could be catastrophic. What if the pursuit of cloning opens doors to other darker technologies, such as mind control, genetic manipulation, or even the creation of artificial intelligence that could replace humans altogether? Could cloning be the first step toward a world where we no longer value life as sacred, but as something we can shape and mold at will? In the end, the future of human cloning lies in our hands. It's up to us to decide what path we want to take. Do we embrace the possibilities, even with the risks? Or do we heed the warning signs and choose to leave cloning as a distant dream, never to be realized? The answers are not clear-cut, and perhaps they never will be. But one thing is certain, the journey we're on is just beginning. The questions surrounding human cloning will only grow more complex as time goes on. And while we may not have all the answers today, we are already at a crossroads that could change the very nature of what it means to be human. So I ask you this: if we could clone ourselves, if we could create the perfect copy of our lives, our bodies and our experiences, would we do it? And if we did, would we still be the same person we were before? It's a question that forces us to confront the very essence of our identity, our humanity, and our place in the world. And as we move closer to a future where human cloning may no longer be just science fiction, we will have to grapple with the answers in ways we can't yet imagine. Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with this thought. As science pushes the boundaries of what's possible, we need to ask ourselves, just because we can do something, does that mean we should? The future of human cloning is in our hands, but it's up to each of us to decide how we use the power we've unlocked. If you found this exploration of cloning as fascinating as I did, let's continue the conversation. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think about human cloning? Is it a step forward for humanity or a dangerous leap into the unknown? Drop your comments below, share this video with those who'd find it intriguing, and let's keep the conversation going.